See what's new in Tanium Asset on today's Tanium Tech Talk. Well, welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone, and many customers depend on Tanium for fresh hardware and software asset data, and that's why we keep making it better. Folks tell us that they like the reporting and the software inventory and usage, the integrations with ServiceNow and Flexera, and they always know it's going to be accurate and fresh. That's what we hear from our customers. And today, we're going to give you a tour of the latest enhancements. And our tour guide is my buddy from Tanium New Hire Training 7 years ago, Roland. He's been on the show before. So, Roland, welcome back and tell folks a little bit about yourself.
I'm Roland Diaz. Like Ashley said, I started here 7 years ago with him at Tanium. I am now the technical product manager for our asset discovery and inventory suite, which includes asset, it includes discover and SBOM.
Well, Roland, it's always good to see you. And you and I were around to see the birth of the asset module several years ago here in our Tanium career. So for those who don't know what it does, could you give us just a quick overview of what is asset?
So what asset is, it's Tanium's way of collecting CMDB-centric data. It was primarily built for our integrations with ServiceNow and Flexera. And the whole idea behind it was before Tanium had any data services behind it, there was no way to really store long-term data for endpoints that were offline. So what we would do is ask a series of safe questions in the background, and then Asset would collect that data. It would format it in a CSDM compliant format that we could then make available to integration partners like ServiceNow and Flexera.
So you threw out a lot of acronyms there. What is CSDM?
So it stands for Common Service Data Model. Basically, it's what any third-party integrator like a CMDB would want to have within its ServiceNow.
And CMDB is a configuration management database. That's
Yes.
all our hardware and software asset inventory data. So you're
Yep.
here to talk about what's new and what's improved. So what's driving these improvements?
Largely our customers, and really a way for us to give more value out of asset outside of just giving you inventory. So a couple of years ago, we launched what we call software inventory and usage, and we got a lot of feedback from our customers. We had a lot of internal feedback that said really we wanted to make our SIU exposure more of a one-click solution versus having to drill down and getting and finding data. We also had some limits around at the time around how many applications we could pull usage information back on. So really what we did with this latest version is we kind of like lifted those limits and met the needs of what our customers have been asking us for the last couple of years.
So what are some examples of these recent improvements then?
So the biggest one really is that when you typically ask for SIU install products, all you ever got back was the vendor, the name, and the version of the product. And that was about it. You didn't get whether it was being used or not. And then in order for you to choose usage, you would have to go into the SIU dashboards within Asset. You would have to choose the products that you wanted to start getting that information back on. And you were pretty much limited to about 300 products in total. So if you were a customer that had 4,000 products in there and you were an operations manager and you wanted to see everything across your entire real estate, it required a lot of interacting with Interact and asking a lot of questions of endpoints, and it took a lot of time. And what we really wanted to do was make it easier. So the first major change that we made is we added a used unused field into the installed products. So you now get the vendor, the name, the version, and a Boolean for used, and used is defined as any usage within the last 90 calendar days. So now you're getting that without having to track anything across the board.
So if I'm following, so SIU, we used to have the report, we had to go and tell it to track the app. Now you're telling us that whether or not you've done anything like that, just automatically this software inventory and usage SIU is going to have just a hot cold kind of button there for have they touched this at all in the last 90 days, which is just to kind of get us in the ballpark, right? Because we know that without there's a lot of finesse within that, but it sounds like we've got more I guess more attributes coming back from each one of those applications then.
Yeah, it's actually just one more column, but really it's the most important column for an ops manager. If all of a sudden I see a new version of an application like Notepad++ out there in the world, I would have had to have asked a bunch of questions to even understand whether it's being used in my environment or not. Whereas today, we're just collecting that out of the gate, and you can see right on a screen exactly what your usage is. So now if you want to drill down into it, you don't have to write up a whole bunch of complicated questions, and you don't have to spend a lot of your time researching that. It's already there for you.
Now, you mentioned versions specifically.
Yes.
What's new around versions with this one?
So in the old version, in the old SIU collection, when we collected usage information, we rolled it up across the life of the endpoint and across all of the different versions of that software that existed on the endpoint. So if you were using Adobe Acrobat 1 and then you moved to 2 and then you moved to 3, we only ever showed it as Adobe Acrobat. We never gave you the actual version. So now today, especially with our integration partners, I can sit down and give them the vendor, the name, the version of the product, as well as the used for it. We do have a couple of instances where customers have multiple versions of the same product installed on an endpoint, and we can give you the used or the unused all the way down to that specific version of that product. So again, you can take action across that if you need to like reclaim software or get rid of software drift in your environment.
Yeah, I can see where that'd be really handy because, like you said, software adrift, where you've got, hey, we upgraded all this stuff 3 months ago, and there's a version out there that's still getting use in the environment. We want to know about that.
Yep. And that's exactly what we did with all of our enhancements. The other thing that is really big is now within our SIU UI, you can go in and do what we call a flyout, which is a live question in the environment. And you can get a tremendous amount of information on that application that exists on that endpoint. So you can see things like the date that SIU first discovered it, which in most cases will equal the date that the product was installed or upgraded, the date that that version was removed from the endpoint, what the usage bucket looked like within the last 90 calendar days for a version that existed on an endpoint within 90 days. And you can see which is the one that's still installed and what the usage looks like on that. And you can do that without having to track the product. You can just go in, click on a product, and see it immediately. It does
So what
show.
I'm hearing there is you're saying that we can see the version history of an application on an
Yes.
endpoint and know when it was upgraded or uninstalled. That is a whole new level of data we simply not had before.
Well, we always had it. We never exposed it. I think, and that's the
Uh,
key differentiator. So if you've been a customer that has had ACID and SIU running in your environment for a number of years since we first came out about 3 years ago, you have 3 years worth of history on that endpoint that we can show you all the versioning for a particular software on that endpoint.
so to that, then if I've been running asset with the SIU for these last year or two, I'm a new customer. You're telling me that when we turn on this new version in the Tanium console, automatically they'll have all this rich data.
Yep. Going back to when Software Manager was first installed all those years ago. So it's not like you're starting from scratch with this new offering that we're giving you. What we're really doing is we're taking the data that we've been collecting since Software Manager and SIU became a reality, an asset, and now we're bringing that, bubbling that up to you so that as an ops manager, you can make intelligent decisions based on the data in front of you.
Well, let's
Or
take a look at it.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So the first thing I'm going to kind of go in here is I'm going to take a look at the old version. So this is what most customers would have been used to. So if I come in here into software inventory and usage, what you'll notice here in the old UI is you can see the name of the vendor, the name of the application, and you'll see installations with used and unused. But you'll notice down here, it kind of just turns into hashes. And that's because I haven't enabled tracking, which means I haven't told the endpoint to start reporting that data back to me. So like I said before, if I wanted to track something like Notepad++, I can come in here and I can see that I have 6 installs, but I have no idea what the usage looks like. I can drill down and I can get what endpoints it's installed on. But until I turn on tracking, or unless I write a bunch of very complicated questions within Interact, I'm not going to get any detail on this particular application within my environment. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to one of my other labs. So the same thing, I'm going to pivot over into asset. I'm going to go down into software inventory and usage. And now what you're going to see is a bunch of new things here on the screen. So in here, I can see I'm only tracking one application, which is XML Notepad. One of the improvements customer has asked us for is the ability to enable tracking on more than one product at a time. So now you can come in here if you want, and you can choose several products, and you can choose to start tracking or view usage on it. The other thing you can do is we now have radio buttons in here. So now if I come in here and I take a look at Notepad++, now I can see I have 3 installs in my environment. I can see 1 is being used and 2 are not being used. But the real nifty feature in here is that I can click on and get this flyout for usage. And within a few seconds, I've just asked the question live in the environment. So in here, I can see on one of my endpoints, these are all of the different versions of Notepad++ that I've had installed. I can see this is when SIU first discovered it. This is when it was removed and upgraded to the next version. And I can see this across all my versions. I can see the first use date, the last use date by version. And then down here, I can see that 8.7 is my most recent version that I have installed in the environment. It went in about a month ago in October. I last used it a couple of days ago. And I'm a pretty heavy user of the Notepad++ application. So I'm using it between 60 and 239 minutes a day. And again,
Wow.
I
This
can see
I'm just looking at this. My eyes are literally just drinking in this data. This is great. I mean, I can just see people watching this video and cheering like, yes, this is what we've always wanted. Wow.
right. And the good thing is, even within Interact, like I can go in and ask a question about a specific version. So let's say I'm doing a compliance report and I have to prove to my CISO that I've removed, like, let's say 8.6 had a known vulnerability in it. I can go in and run an Interact query specific to Notepad++ version 8.6, and I can see everywhere in the environment and when it was removed. So I can see across the board all of the removal dates for every single one of my endpoints, so that I can say, yes, I was compliant. You told me I had a week to get this out of the environment. I did it within that timeline that you gave me. And really, now that I've drilled in here and as an ops manager, I'm like, this is a pretty interesting product. I think I want to start tracking this for license recovery. I can just hit start tracking and that's it. I'm done.
All right,
Um,
so I got to ask then, what's the tracking do? I've got all this data already. What more does tracking do for me?
so what tracking is going to do is much like the older version of it did. So in this particular case, for my endpoint, it's going to report back that I'm a normal user, that my last use date was October 30th for this version of Notepad++. So what it's going to do is it's going to roll all that data up, because I don't really need this other data. It doesn't make a difference to me that something that was removed 3 weeks ago has any usage on it. I'm really concerned today about this particular product. So the best way to think of it is, when I track it, I'm telling the endpoint, hey, give me the information that you have on there. The other difference that you're going to get within asset and within SIU is usage is defined as not installed. So let's say I have a compliance. So let's say this is a piece of software that is required on every single endpoint. When I turn on tracking for this, I am going to get back in the usage bucket not installed. Now, I don't get that here because I don't care about anything that's not installed in an endpoint in a live question. I'd get way too much data. I really only care about what's on the endpoint for this particular version and what does that look like. So again, if I'm doing a compliance report and I need to have this application or this version installed and it's not installed on a product, by turning on usage, I will get back not installed. I mean, usage not detected obviously is one of the other values. So that basically says that within the measurement period, I haven't detected any usage, even though my last use date, like here, was November of 2023. That's more than 90 days ago. So as far as the algorithm is concerned, it's not really being used, which today it wouldn't be.
Let's see. So you said there's also some performance enhancements on the back end. What's that about?
Yes. So within Tanium, if you've been using Tanium for a while, you've heard of something called Tanium Data Service, or TDS. In the old versions of Asset, up until what's about to be released, typically what happened was we would go out and every time you added a sensor or you added an attribute into Asset, it would build a new save question. So in an environment as small as even like 6 endpoints, it could take upwards of 45 minutes for the old asset save questions to ask all the questions in your environment, pull that data back. We would do a full rip and replace of that data. So basically, we would delete everything that we had for your endpoint because it was responding, and we would replace it all with new data. And it was okay. It served our purposes, but as we grew and as our customers grew, they wanted to be able to get closer to real-time data within Tanium Asset. So once Tanium Data Service or TDS became a reality, what we decided probably about a year ago, and our cloud customers have been leveraging this for almost a year now, is that we've decided instead of asking the same questions, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Tanium Data Service because it uses what they call a continuous collection model. So when you go into Asset and you register an entity or an attribute or a sensor within the Asset module, it basically automatically registers that sensor within TDS. It starts collecting that data for Asset to then go out and recover that data. And the important part of that is historically, when asset save questions were asked, there's kind of, it was this golden 15-minute window at the beginning of that collection cycle that if an endpoint was online, we would collect the data for it. But if it was offline or not available, it wouldn't, until it was seen during that magic 15 window, we wouldn't see it. But now with TDS and a continual collection that happens in there, the minute a brand new endpoint registers with Tanium, TDS starts collecting data for it, and that data is now immediately available to Asset. So
I can
what we,
imagine. Yeah, I was just gonna say I can imagine that customers running a report and Tanium reporting, seeing software and hardware data and the numbers. It's possible wouldn't match what was an asset previously
oh yeah,
because asset had a different data source on the back end. But now that everybody's singing from the same hymnal, so to speak, we should have matching numbers that'll be nice and faster and fresher within asset.
yes. The other improvement that we did within there is that instead of doing that full rip and replace, what we're doing is what we call differential loads. So what ends up happening is that if since the last time asset connected to TDS, if that nothing on that endpoint changed, I don't need to query it. I don't need to pull that data out of TDS. So I've seen customers have over a tenfold performance improvement in the question time. So for instance, in some of our labs, I've seen questions that took 2 or 3 hours are now completing in under 5 minutes. So instead of taking hours to pull that data into Asset and replace it, we can now run the data collection every 10 minutes within TDS to Asset, and you have pretty much real-time data within Asset.
So this is all back end like Tanium server stuff that normally we
Yes.
wouldn't see in the UI. Does this have anything to do with? I guess once we get the data internally within Tanium, that probably wouldn't have. Would that have any impact on like how fast we sync with this integration products on the externally?
Um, it not so much how fast we sync, but the accuracy of the data. So remember that 15-minute magic window. If that endpoint wasn't online, if it happens to be something that was only online once every 3 or 4 days, and it's not on during that window when the old saved question was asked, that thing would never get captured and put into inventory. So now what customers are seeing is that they're getting a fuller fidelity of products inside of their third-party integration because of the fact that TDS is collecting data all the time and storing it, regardless of whether Asset is ingesting it or not. So our next ingestion cycle, it's available. So you can have an endpoint go live, and 15 minutes later, it's available for integration to your CMDB like ServiceNow or Flexera.
Wow. I mean, we've had accurate data in the past, but now it's even more accurate. Is it like more infinite? I mean, it's like how do you quantify that, right? It's like so we've got the data now. It's even closer to real time. It's not exactly real time, but within a few minutes, which still blow. I'm just thinking of where else in the industry can you find this much data this fast, right? And have it sync to ServiceNow or something like that fast. This is really a significant enhancement. It sounds like on the back end.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the reason why, we partner with ServiceNow because of that. We can pull the data faster for them and more accurate data and more actionable data than they can with their discovery method because we don't have to crawl the networks and basically what we used to do, which would take hours, we can now do within minutes. And
All
again,
right.
the data you're getting out of Asset is near real time.
All right, so you got me sold. How do I get this? How do I know if it's in my, if I'm a cloud customer, if I'm on prem, what do I have to do to get it?
talk to your DSA, let them know that you're really interested in this product. There's a lot of other features within Asset. I've only kind of scratched on the surface, but from a previous ops manager's position before I came here to Tanium, to me, the ability to see the versioning, to see the version drift, to see the usage, to get all of this data real time with a click of a mouse now is it saves so much of my time and it makes my job so much easier to make intelligent decisions. I mean, just think about it. You could, in theory, recover enough software license usage to cover the cost of some other project you want to work on. Hopefully it's buying more Tanium.
So as far as the upgrade's concerned, I should be more specific. How do I get the upgrade then if I'm an existing customer?
So if you're an existing customer and you're in cloud, it's already there. You already have these features available to you. The version that I just demoed now with the flyouts and everything is going to be available in our full release. But I'm assuming that by the time this video comes out, we probably are about a week or two away from this being available.
And that's for our on-prem
For
customers.
our
So
on-prem customer, yes.
when this, it sounds like there's nothing I have to do to make this work or go set anything. It just kind of works out of the box. Is that right?
It's been working out of the box for 3 years if you've already had it in your environment.
All right. Yeah. So I think we talked a little bit about what's next. We covered some FAQs. Anything else you want to do here as we wrap up?
There's some more exciting stuff coming out shortly within Asset. We are getting more closely integrated with TDS. There will be a time when the TDS and the Asset database will be one. That is, kind of on our roadmap. Again, no dates on that. I make no promises, but it is where we are working right now.
Roland, thanks for this update on what's new in Tanium Asset. So we've got the software inventory and usage has much more granular data now available in that little flyout tab that he showed us. And on the back end, again, the accuracy is improving, the speed is improving, and there's nothing, it's kind of out of the box. It just works. So there's nothing to go tweak when you get it. And for the cloud customers, you've already got it. For on-prem, it's going to be in that the SAR, the semi-annual release for the fall of calendar year 2024. So look for those updates and let us know. Talk to us on social media, talk to your account team. Let us know how this has helped you with these improvements. And as always, stay tuned to the show for more upcoming enhancements. And until next time, Go-Tanium.